He was a powerhouse in the ring, a beloved figure in British boxing, and the man who carried the hopes of the nation on his broad shoulders. Frank Bruno, with his thunderous power and relentless determination, managed to claim a world title against all the odds. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a symbol of grit, heart, and most of all, British pride. But how good was he? In this video, I'll break down his career from his biggest victories to his most crushing defeats and answer the ultimate question: how good was Frank Bruno actually? Born in Hammersmith, London, England in 1961, Frank started boxing at age 9 at the local Wandsworth Boys Club. He later learnt to take the sport more seriously while at the Oak Hall School in Sussex, an establishment for problem children. Bruno didn't have the most extensive amateur career, only racking up 20 wins and suffering one defeat, which he later avenged in the pros. However, in his short time spent as an amateur, he was able to become the youngest ever amateur British champion at just 18 years old. Bruno would turn over to the professional ranks in 1982. At this time, the British heavyweight scene was crying out for a true contender. It's not like today where Britain seems to be producing heavyweight contenders for fun. Back in the 80s, the nation hadn't produced a world champion yet in the 20th century, so there was a lot of pressure put on Bruno to become a world champion. Bruno had the perfect start to his professional career, emphatically stopping his first 20 opponents.
Up with the left jab there, down he goes again. Nielsen a big man, but crouching over and taken with a right hand. That was a good left hook and it's taken everything out of Jameson. Oh, good punch, right and left hand, and over goes. Oh, he's got it. Start of the second round, and the Belgian is over, and that might be it for the night, and it is. Second round, Bruno does it again.
In these early bouts, Bruno showed he could be a serious threat to the heavyweight division. He had a great, long and powerful jab and serious knockout power. However, as good as Bruno looked in these early fights, there were some glaring flaws. Most notably, his lack of fluidity. He looked very stiff at times, and that would be a common criticism throughout Bruno's career. Bruno's team were desperate to find someone who could provide the young heavyweight a true test, and they found the perfect opponent in Bruno's 21st fight in the form of American fringe contender Floyd Cummings. For the first time in his career, Bruno would face serious adversity as Floyd had him out on his feet with a right hand at the very end of round 1. Bruno was seriously fortunate that the bell went right at the time of his first real crisis moment of his career. If it didn't, I'm sure that Bruno would have been stopped there and then. Bruno recovered well from what was a disastrous first round, and he showed he had lots of heart and ambition. In round 7, Bruno hurt Floyd with a big right hand of his own, which had Floyd desperately holding on. Bruno showed great killer instinct and finished the American off with another well-timed right hand to end the fight for good. One thing you can't train for in boxing is heart. You either have it or you don't, and Bruno showed that night that he had plenty of it. In May of 1984, Bruno would take on his toughest opponent to date, the up-and-coming future heavyweight champion, James Bone Crusher Smith. After 9 rounds, Bruno was well ahead on points, but instead of fighting conservatively and looking to protect his lead, Bruno left himself exposed and Smith took advantage by landing a big left hand that had Bruno hurt, and he followed up by landing a multitude of combinations which Bruno didn't defend, and eventually the American found the decisive shot with a left hook that put the Brit down, and the fight was all over. It was a disastrous first professional defeat for Bruno.
Frank, I'm sorry, old son. What do we say about that?
What can I say, Harry? You know what I mean? Some of us get beaten. I was winning every round, but got caught and I got put down and got knocked out. What can I say about that? Sometimes we all get knocked out.
I try to tell everybody that experience is what he needs, and tonight showed he needs experience because he was so far in front, and a bit more experience, he'd have known how to coast that round and gone home with a win.
In his rebuild, Frank would get 3 straightforward victories before being matched up with former European champion Lucien Rodriguez. Lucien was supposed to provide a good test for Frank, but the fight proved to be a mismatch. Bruno's power was on full display as he stopped the former champion with a right hand in the very first round. It was a statement performance from Bruno, considering Rodriguez hadn't been stopped in 6 years and went the full distance with the likes of Larry Holmes. Following this win, Frank would then get the opportunity to fight for a European heavyweight title, which was then held by Swedish fighter Anders Eklund. Bruno made light work of the Swede. In the 4th round, he landed a huge right to the side of Anders' head, where he followed up with a massive right uppercut and finished Anders off with multiple heavy right hands. Bruno had won his first major title and became the new heavyweight European champion.
Frank, congratulations. Well, how does it feel to be a champion?
It feels beautiful, very, very beautiful. I didn't think I would see you again, Harry, you know what I mean? I thought you retired from the show, but...
No, you got it all wrong. No. Right, tell me all about it.
Well, at first I tried to knock him out because I know someone else knocked him out and people what beat him, but he was a good guy, big 17 and a half stone, and he could jab and move well and he could punch. I dig a little bit, but I thank God I'm champion, Harry. You don't know how it feels to be champion.
After a second round knockout over American Larry Fraser, Bruno would face arguably his biggest test of his career thus far, former WBA heavyweight world champion Jerry Coetzee. Coetzee was expected to give Bruno problems, however Bruno didn't read the script and he would put on another destructive performance. In just 55 seconds of the very first round, Coetzee had already hit the deck from a Bruno right hand. Bruno continued to pressure the South African and eventually connected with another big right. Bruno was now ready for his first crack at a world title. In July of 1986, in a packed Wembley Stadium, Bruno challenged American Tim Witherspoon for the WBA heavyweight title. Intending to become the first British-born heavyweight champion in 90 years, there was a lot of pressure for Bruno to deliver. The Brit started the fight positively. He was boxing well with his heavy jab, but as the fight progressed, Bruno's stamina began to become an issue. As Bruno was starting to slow down, Witherspoon began to take over the fight. In the 11th round, the American would show his quality by stopping Bruno by landing 3 massive right hands. It was an alarming performance from Bruno, which showed that despite being ahead in a fight, his gas tank could let him down when it mattered most. And this wouldn't be the last time Bruno would be winning on the scorecards, only to be let down by his lack of stamina. In March of 1987, Bruno would take on James Quick Tillis, who was most known for being the first man to take Mike Tyson the distance. The American was a credible enough opponent for Bruno, as his nickname would suggest he had fast hands, but also a powerful jab and left hook. But ultimately, he wouldn't put up much resistance as he would be stopped in the 5th round by heavy right hands from Bruno. Bruno was now one step closer to getting a second world title shot against the then champion Iron Mike Tyson, who was there in attendance and provided his thoughts on Bruno's performance.
We've got Mike Tyson, the world heavyweight champion, Frank Bruno, who might one day challenge you, Mike. Just tell Frank what you were telling me down there in the commentary about his performance.
I thought he did a tremendous performance, Frank. I commend you. And I know how it is fighting a fighter like James Tillis on an 8-month layoff. It's a spoiler. You came out very well. Your punches, I thought, at a boxer point of view, knowing your layoff, it was tremendous, accurate, and I'm very impressed. Very kind. And I look forward to meeting you in the future.
I look forward to meeting you as well.
Thank you very much.
In October of 1987, Frank would face former British, European, and Commonwealth heavyweight champion Joe Bugner. The 37-year-old Bugner was very experienced, but certainly past his best at this stage of his career. Also, fun fact, this was Barry Hearn and Matchroom's first foray into boxing promotion, and it was a huge success. In front of a 40,000 strong crowd at White Hart Lane, Bruno put on a dominant performance. Bruno's jab looked sharp and powerful in the opening rounds, and he looked comfortable while Bugner was struggling to mount any significant attacks. In the final 30 seconds of round 8, Bruno unleashed a huge right that had Bugner in big trouble, and he would soon be dropped after Frank unloaded a barrage of heavy shots. Bugner got back up, but Frank leapt into action instantly to finish Bugner off for good, with more powerful combinations.
Frank Bruno, many congratulations first of all, Frank. How much did that victory mean to you?
It was a part of my life, and I couldn't have walked the streets tonight if Joe would have beat me. He's a very good, experienced guy. A lot of people knew he was experienced. They knew it was a good fight. A lot of people thought he was going to beat me tonight. But I thank God, I thank my manager Terry Lawless, I thank George Francis, Frank Black, I thank everybody, especially Barry Hearns, for giving me the opportunity, and thank Joe Bugner. Put the camera in all the crowd. All of England was on my back, and I had to knock him out, and I did knock him out. And this is all for people, a Christmas present for everybody.
The victory over Buckner was enough for Frank to get a second shot at a world title, and in February 1989, Bruno challenged the phenom that was Prime Mike Tyson for undisputed. In classic Tyson fashion, the fight was fought at 100 miles per hour from the opening bell, and straight away Tyson had Bruno hurt from a short right hand, which put him on wobbly legs. Tyson jumped on Bruno and put him down with a right hand. Bruno recovered and managed to rock Tyson with a right hand of his own at the end of the round, which was the first time Tyson had been seriously hurt in his pro career up until that point. Tyson recovered well and finished the round strong. Frank stood up to a lot of heavy punches from Tyson throughout the fight, but ultimately he was broken down in round 5 after Tyson managed to get Frank backed up to the ropes and unload brutal uppercuts and hooks to knock him out on his feet. Bruno would rebuild with wins over decent contenders and gatekeepers of the division, such as Jose Rebolta and the big strong African Pierre Coetzer, both of whom Bruno would dispatch in good fashion. Bruno was close to getting a second crack at a world title, but first he'd need to take care of former world title challenger Carl Williams. Williams was a decent all-round heavyweight. The 6'4" American had a solid jab, good speed and power. Williams managed to take Bruno into the 10th and final round, but the British heavyweight managed to detonate his right hand when it mattered most, and he knocked Williams out. In October of 1993, billed as the Battle of Britain, Frank would face fellow Brit and WBC world champion Lennox Lewis, in what was Frank's third shot at a world title.
He can run around and shout off how much he wants in the ring, but when I catch up with him, all he's got to do is blink once and his lights are out, mate.
He's jealous at the fact that he's not a winner. He's tried to get the WBC champion or be the champion of the world twice, and he's failed. This is going to be his third attempt, and again he's going to fail.
Bruno started the fight well, landing some solid jabs and even stunning Lewis in the third from a huge right hand. The fight was even going into the 7th round, but Lewis finally broke Bruno down when he landed a counter left hook, which staggered him. Lewis proceeded to jump on the vulnerable Bruno and put together some brutal combinations. The onslaught from Lewis was momentarily stopped as Lewis was warned by the referee for stiff-arming with his left hand. Really, the fight should have been stopped there and then. But unfortunately for Bruno, the referee was the boxing equivalent of Mario Yamasaki, and he allowed Lewis to continue to add further punishment on the already dazed and confused Bruno, and after another big uppercut and right hands, the fight was stopped. Bruno wouldn't allow his third setback in his career to deter him from his end goal of becoming a world champion. After obliterating his next 3 opponents following the Lewis defeat, Bruno's promoter Frank Warren managed to negotiate a deal with Don King, promoter of the WBC champion Oliver McCall, for Bruno to fight his man. Initially, King wasn't interested in the fight, but after some smart negotiation tactics from Frank in underselling Bruno's chances in the fight, King agreed and Bruno's 4th world title shot was official. On September 2nd, 1995 in Wembley Stadium in London, Frank Bruno would take on Oliver McCall for the WBC world title. This was Frank's last real chance to become a world champion, and the entire nation was behind him. So much so that even British Army patrols were stopped so soldiers could watch Frank fight live. Bruno started the fight fast and had no problem connecting with his shots. His excellent left jab was looking sharp, and his big right hand connected clean on multiple occasions, and even rocked McCall at one point with a looping right hand. McCall's eyes started to swell up and became worse as the rounds went on. He wasn't really doing much offensively in these early rounds, but he was absorbing the punishment from Bruno. After a great first half of the fight, many expected Frank to begin to gas out, like he had done previously in the second half of fights. However, Bruno did a good job for the most part in conserving his energy by clinching when McCall came close, which gave him some valuable resting time. In the final few rounds, it was essentially Bruno's to lose. He was ahead on the scorecards and he just needed to survive and evade the right hand of McCall. The American wouldn't go out quietly, and he managed to hurt Bruno with a short left uppercut in the 11th, and he quickly followed up with a big right hand, and for the first time in the fight, Bruno was looking vulnerable. Bruno dug deep and tied McCall up to survive the remainder of the round. Bruno was now just 3 minutes away from becoming the heavyweight champion of the world, and all he needed to do was hear the final bell. McCall continued where he left off and managed to land an uppercut almost immediately after the round started, and shortly after he would land a hard right. McCall was throwing everything but the kitchen sink at Bruno in a last-ditch effort to save his world title. 3 minutes must have felt like an eternity for those at Wembley, as Frank was in full survival mode, using all his ring experience to survive the constant onslaught from McCall. The American champion was landing lefts, rights and uppercuts, but still Bruno remained on his feet, and after an exhausting final round, the final bell finally came.
Judges at ringside, Newton Campos and Rai Solis both score the mat at 117 to 111. All three in favor of the winner and new WBC heavyweight champion of the world. Bruno is the champion. Bruno.
It was pandemonium at Wembley. Finally, Frank had done it. At the 4th time of asking, Bruno was the world heavyweight champion.
Frank, many congratulations on behalf of the whole country.
I thank everybody that's watching the television, and I thank my wife, I thank my mum, I thank everybody for taking the opportunity of standing behind me. And it was tough in there, but I done it, you know.
You confounded the critics, Frank, because they said you could never last 12 rounds, that your stamina would go, but you proved them wrong.
I did. It was tough in there. It was tough, man, but I done it, you know. It's hard to sort of put it into words because I'm busted up at the moment, but I'm just over the moon, man. I'm happy, you know.
His relentless determination finally paid off. The entire country rejoiced at Frank's victory, and following his win, he would go on an open bus tour parade around London, with thousands of fans there to congratulate their champion.
Hello to you from Marble Arch. Well, as you can see behind me, there's great excitement building up here. Thousands of fans have turned out to see their hero. Frank Bruno arrived a few moments ago. He's just getting himself ready for the tour on the bus. He's armed, of course, with his heavyweight belt, which he's keen to show off to the fans.
Sorry?
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Yeah, happy birthday to you, mate.
That will be used to dispose of on a whole. Let's go back to Mark Saggers on board.
In March of 1996, Bruno would make his first defense of his WBC world title in a rematch against Mike Tyson. Yeah, not the easiest first defense of your world title. Unlike their first encounter, Bruno didn't provide much resistance at all to Tyson. The first round of the fight was a disaster for Bruno, as he suffered a big cut after receiving heavy shots from Tyson. Tyson continued his attacks into round 2, while Bruno looked to tie Tyson up and survive the round. Less than a minute into the 3rd round, Tyson unloaded an explosive combination of heavy punches that caused referee Mills Lane to stop the fight. This would prove to be the very last time we would see Big Frank in the ring, as he was forced to retire after this fight due to a reoccurrence of an eye injury, which was originally caused during his first fight with Tyson. Bruno was advised not to fight again to avoid running the risk of causing any further damage. Bruno would retire from the sport of boxing with a final record of 40 wins, 5 defeats, capturing the European and WBC world titles. So how good was Frank Bruno actually? For me, Bruno was a great but not elite heavyweight. He was never on the level of the likes of Lennox Lewis or Evander Holyfield, and that's because he had a very limited skill set. He had a basic one-dimensional style with poor fight IQ. Also, one of the biggest issues with Frank was his lack of fluidity. He was very stiff and upright. His stamina was also a big issue, which let him down in key fights in his career, and I also think his defensive skills weren't the best. That being said, Frank did possess some great qualities too. Firstly, his left jab was truly excellent throughout his career. It wasn't on the level of the likes of Holmes or Lennox Lewis's jab, but it served him well. He also carried massive power in his right hand, which managed to knock out 38 of his 45 opponents. As well as that, Bruno was also a great finisher. Once he had his man hurt, more times than not, he would get the stoppage. And finally, Bruno only lost to top level fighters. Every single one of his defeats came against guys who would taste world championship success in their careers. He didn't exactly lose to cab drivers. So there we go. Let me know what you make of Frank Bruno's career in the comments below. Also, if you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know, because I always note them down. And as always, thanks very much for watching.